Hello and welcome. I'm Catalina Marchant de Abreu and you're watching W News Extra. Broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios, these are our top stories. Trump tells world leaders he wants to buy Greenland and insists he won't use force to get it. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff says he'll meet with Putin tomorrow as reports suggest plans to sign a multi-billion-pound prosperity package for a post-war Ukraine have been postponed. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accepts an invitation to join President Trump's Board of Peace. U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing for immediate negotiations to acquire Greenland, calling the territory crucial for U.S. national security and military strategy. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he insisted he won't use force, though he warned the U.S. would be unstoppable if needed. Trump's plan has sparked pushback from Denmark, Europe, and NATO allies. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark, tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States. We're a great power, much greater than people even understand. We need it for strategic national security and international security. This enormous unsecured island is actually part of North America, on the northern frontier of the Western Hemisphere. That's our territory. It is therefore a core national security interest of the United States of America. And in fact, it's been our policy for hundreds of years to prevent outside threats from entering our hemisphere, and we've done it very successfully. We've never been stronger than we are now.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Managing Director, This is Dubai, here in studio, Michael Jabri-Pickett, who's with me, and journalist and broadcaster Isabel Webster, speaking to us from Surrey. Now we'll start with Michael here. Freebies, including the Golden Dome.
So it's a little bit tricky when you're talking about Donald Trump. You don't want to fact check him because if he doesn't like what you say, he'll just say fake news. So you can't get stuck in a tit for tat, your anniversary of his second term in office. But I would say that as a Canadian, I would want to fact check a few things. So from a historical point of view, I wouldn't say that we have had a lot of freebies. We certainly benefit being so close to the United States. We are either the first or second trading partner of the US. Canada and Mexico sort of flip-flop depending on who has the more productive year. We also send an awful lot of oil to America. And perhaps one of the issues that Donald Trump would best understand is that we fought alongside the US in the First World War and the Second World War. In fact, we entered both years before the US did. We also fought as Canadians in the Korean War and, of course, in Afghanistan. So there are certain benefits that every Canadian would say we definitely are able to take advantage of because of our proximity to the world superpower. But it's not a free ride. And there is an awful lot that Canada has sacrificed over the centuries. And Donald Trump, when he doesn't like the narrative, he'll just stick to his own narrative. And that's what he did in Davos today.
Well, thank you for the fact check there today, Michael. Much needed with everything going on. Now going on to Isabel, the UK Prime Minister has said he will not yield to Trump over the tariff threats. Where does the UK and EU stand on this retaliation? And could we see this trade bazooka that Emmanuel Macron suggested? Could we see this being used against US as a retaliation method?
I mean, there's no guessing what we might see. I think we are in unprecedented times, and we're hearing that from the very top of many countries at the moment. It's worth pointing out that this is definitely the strongest rhetoric that I've ever heard Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, using in relation to the Trump administration. Up until now, he's been very eager to please and to appease. Of course, we all know that, of course, he wheeled out the royal family, offering this unprecedented second state visit. But since we've been talking so much about Mark Carney, I feel I ought to quote a line from his speech, which I must say really, I think, set him apart in a different class from Trump, just in terms of some of the ideas and arguments that he was setting out. But in that speech, he said, compliance will no longer buy safety. And I think it was really important. That's obviously a view that Starmer has taken. He will not yield. Obviously, there's been this row over the Chagos Islands, which up until, I think even on Monday, Trump was okay with, but on Tuesday decided to shame the UK over because he wanted to pressure the position on Greenland. Now, the UK has a difficult situation because we obviously left the European Union through Brexit. Do we want to go back into the embrace of Europe, who under Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission, who also gave an excellent speech today, said they stand ready to act together and with urgency? Or do they lean towards their traditional special relationship, but that is now no longer reliable? And I think it's a very difficult path to tread. And it's almost like, and I've heard people describe it as a sort of medieval king that you're dealing with, and you never quite know what whim or mood you might be facing. But I think it is absolutely right that on certain things there is a red line. The sovereignty of Denmark and Greenland must be respected. And, otherwise we may well see the end of the 76-year alliance of NATO.
Exactly. And more on that, Michael, you were talking to us a bit more about the Canadian Prime Minister's speech, Carney. You said that he actually, I thought this was quite interesting because it was quite a popular speech. You said that he actually wrote it himself. He
did. So according to anonymous sources, as a journalist's favorite sort of source, my guess is that he was so invested in making sure that he continued to ride this wave that he's enjoyed from a nationalistic point of view because of his success with the Chinese deal. But also he is somebody who's not unfamiliar with Davos, having been head of Bank of England as well as Bank of Canada. He knows Davos very well. He's been there about 30 times. And this was a speech that he wanted to make sure that he was able to hit all the right chords. And as a Canadian, I'm recognizing that he's becoming a little bit more comfortable in these moments when he does have to deliver a speech and people start to recognize how important words are. And when you're in North America, it's the Prime Minister of Canada, the US President, and then of course it's the leader of Mexico. If you can stand a little bit taller than some of your peers, I think that on the world stage, that helps you stand that much taller as well.
I agree, Mike. I think a little bit of it is about reading the room as well. And where you had President Trump making, gaffe after gaffe, calling Greenland, Iceland, talking about Azerbaijan. He talked about you'd all be speaking German or perhaps a bit of Japanese if it wasn't for us in a corner of Switzerland where there are many German speakers living there. It couldn't have been more tone deaf. And then you have, by contrast, Mark Carney, who is aware that Trump has said that they want to make his nation the 51st state. But in a room full of CEOs, inventors of AI, the world's sort of most powerful businesses, people he deals with on a regular basis, basically pitching Canada and saying, look, we are an energy superpower, we are a reliable trading partner, and he said we've got what the world wants. We also have the most highly educated workforce. So whereas Trump went out, and it was amazing, I think, that the silence in that room for a lot of the speech, Mark Carney was trying to very cleverly and carefully position his nation in a room of movers and shakers. And I think that juxtaposition was absolutely fascinating today.
And Isabel, also, what do you think about Trump's position on NATO today? Because he always has this sentiment of unfairness or an unfair treatment towards him. He said that he's gotten absolutely nothing from NATO. What do you think of that?
Well, as a reporter here in the UK, I covered many of the repatriations of British servicemen and women who were returning, tragically, who died, one of whom was a friend of mine, into the UK. And it's just hugely not only false, but disrespectful to the families who continue to grieve for their loved ones. Britain actually lost more soldiers in the wake of 9/11 after the invasion of Afghanistan than America did, and had more repatriations. So I think it would do very well for the Trump administration to remember that. Actually, Canada as well, of course, served shoulder to shoulder with America. And look, NATO was born out of a horrendous world war, the likes of which nobody ever wanted to see again. And I feel like memories are becoming shorter and shorter, and history is being rewritten in some places. And, this is a time for calm and for respect. And sometimes I think, well, I know that Donald Trump is wide of that mark.
Well, it's good to have a perspective, UK and Canada, here to fact check on everything that's going on today. Thank you both for your thoughts there. So stay right there as we move on to another story right now. A European backlash against Trump's push to acquire Greenland is now spilling over into Ukraine diplomacy. The Financial Times reports tensions have delayed a planned $800 billion prosperity package for post-war Ukraine that was set to be unveiled at Davos. Officials say disputes over Trump's Board of Peace and Greenland derailed talks, with the U.S. missing a key meeting. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is also scheduled to meet with Putin tomorrow. So, Isabel, with everything going on with Greenland, has Ukraine been forgotten, sidelined here? Trump said he was going to meet Zelenskyy at Davos. There's also been competing reports about this. Is Zelenskyy going to Davos? Is he not? What do you think about Ukraine here?
It's a really difficult one. Zelenskyy has been reported as saying, look, it's not comparable, Greenland with Ukraine. And obviously there is an ongoing active war situation that he's having to deal with every day. Greenland, though, has seriously irked, concerned and, confused NATO allies who, during Trump's speech today, will be forgiven for thinking they were the enemy. There was no criticism of Russia or of Putin or any of our, obvious enemies. No talk of China and their cyber attacks, but it was talking about, historic allies today. So Zelenskyy didn't come to Davos. Now, there is an argument that was also because of what's happening at home. There's been this increase in ballistic attacks from Russia. Kyiv's parliament is without power, and I believe half of the city is also without power, which would be a catastrophe under normal circumstances. But given that we are at the end of January, it is minus 19 degrees. So it is a very grave situation. He's reporting an increase in these audacious ballistic attacks. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this is in the wake of Putin being invited onto a board with the word peace in it, when the world is discussing whether or not one superpower can acquire another superpower by force or by threat. And so whilst Russia acts with impunity, this highly important financial package for Ukraine has been pushed off the agenda. Now, in Trump's speech, he said that he would be meeting with Zelenskyy tomorrow, but it is unclear if that will go ahead, given the situation at home and also just the disquiet with the sort of the way that the Trump administration are handling this. As you just mentioned, Witkoff, the real estate deal maker, he's not an appointed official. The special envoy is heading with his son-in-law back to Moscow. They use their Russian translators. It's all very much under Putin's terms. And meanwhile, Zelenskyy is not at the table once again. It's worrying. It's not right. Let's hope Zelenskyy does turn up in Davos tomorrow if he can, and have an all-important meeting with Trump to discuss the future of Ukraine.
Exactly. So Trump-Zelenskyy meeting, unclear for now. Michael, as you also mentioned, we know that Witkoff will be meeting with Putin on Thursday. So what message does this send to Zelenskyy? Do you think he feels sidelined again?
I think he's been sidelined the entire time. I can't imagine that he feels emboldened by the move. But for the package that's supposed to be delivered after the war, I think he should be concerned about that, because I do believe that one of Donald Trump's weaknesses is that he doesn't have the follow-through. He may be focused on something and he may be able to sort of put people in the same room, hope something happens, but he doesn't have the attention to detail that's necessary. Now, for the peace proposal deal, I do think that President Zelenskyy can feel optimistic about that, because I do get the sense that the way that Donald Trump was talking during the fireside chat after the rambling speech at Davos, he did say to Steve Witkoff in the audience that we were reasonably close. And he also said that if President Zelenskyy and President Putin do not make a deal, that, quote, they're stupid. I think his rhetoric is ramping up, partly because he's getting sick of it, but also I do believe that he is being told that there are moves on both sides, and I think that there is an end that's going to come close, or excuse me, I think the war is going to come to an end very soon, and I think that the Americans have been sharing with the Russians what they believe the Russians need to hear so that they're not completely surprised when this peace proposal is presented to them. And I do believe that Donald Trump, because he's being a little bit more forceful in his language, he has reason to feel that there is optimism. And by extension, I think President Zelenskyy should be feeling optimistic about a peace deal as well.
Exactly. There's also this 20-point plan being discussed in this peace deal, where there have been analysts saying that there's the 5 to 3 sticking points that are not being agreed on, especially the Donbass or territory and security guarantees. Do you think the fact that Russia's the one calling U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, this is also quite unusual at this point of peace talks, do you think this is a positive sign?
I can't imagine that they don't know what the other side is really concerned about. I also would like to think that when you have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff flying again to see Putin or meeting with him if it's going to be in Davos, that there is going to be there should be no surprises. Everybody should know what it is that they need to talk about. At this level of diplomacy, even though these men are not career diplomats, you would like to think that everybody is aware the 2 or 3 issues that have to be discussed. We're going to go in with a plan to address them. Otherwise, what's the point of having the meeting at all?
Exactly. And Isabel, the prosperity plan, if it's not going to take place in Davos, doesn't mean it will no longer take place. But when it does, what does this plan entail? And do you think that this actually delay in signing that we're looking at now and this uncertainty if Zelenskyy is going to show up or not in Davos and meet with Trump, how do you think, or do you think that this is giving Moscow kind of an advantage here?
Moscow sees advantages left, right, and centre. You know, even Trump's speech today, they'll be delighted with how that went. And the fact that Zelenskyy was unable to attend because of the terrible destruction of the historic city of Kyiv will also be a win for them. So make no mistake about that. I'm sure that this will go ahead, but I'm not as confident as Michael. I'm afraid that a peace deal is as close as he thinks. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But there are such critical sticking points, and, you know, certainly top brass in the West are worried that we are creating a nation in Ukraine that will be like a tethered goat, and we want to make it an unappealing sort of premise for Putin to reinvade either Ukraine or other countries along its border. So at the moment, you know, without the ceding of territory, I think we're a little bit of a way off. I hope I'm wrong. But I'm certain that certainly in terms of a support package for Europe, that will be signed very soon. And I should also mention that in Trump's speech today, he did say he would provide full support for Europe in Ukraine, but that his ultimate price for that would be Greenland. Now I'm doing it. I muddled it up because he actually said would be a little lump of ice, but what he was referring to was, of course, the Danish territory of Greenland.
Just a tiny little lump, right, Isabel? Now, thanks for both your thoughts there. We're going to move on now to another story where Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted an invitation to join U.S. President Donald Trump's Board of Peace. In a statement, his office said, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that he has accepted U.S. President Donald Trump's invitation and will join as a member of the Board of Peace, which will be composed of leaders of the world. The board was conceived to oversee the rebuilding of a post-war Gaza. There are reports that members have to pay $1 billion for a permanent spot on it. Now, Michael, what do you make of this Board of Peace, and how do you think Gazans will feel about Netanyahu actually joining it?
Well, first of all, I think of Dr. Evil whenever anybody is demanding $1 billion for something that is probably not realistic. I do feel that Palestinians, not to make light of it, Palestinians, of course, are going to feel like yet again our homeland is being determined without any Palestinian involvement. They're going to feel like the second-class citizens that the global community treats them as. You know, this is Benjamin Netanyahu's genocide that he was orchestrating from soon after the attack on October 7th. And it very quickly turned where the world started to see that you had an unfair advantage, the Israelis and Hamas. And the Palestinians as a people were suffering. I think that for the Palestinians, when it comes to this Board of Peace, so no Palestinian will sit on that board. And then, of course, there's a general executive board that sits below it, and no Palestinian will sit on that. And then there's a Gaza executive board, and no Palestinian will sit on that. It's not until you get to the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza that a Palestinian will be allowed to sit on that board. And this, for them, is par for the course. This is something that they've been dealing with for 80 years. They are yet again being pushed aside, even though the global community seems to be coming together to talk about Gaza. And yet we know from the charter that is being set out for this Board of Peace that there may be loftier ambitions for it rather than just to focus on Gaza.
Yeah, and Isabel, do you believe here that we'll see a phasing out of the UN if an organization like this exists with world leaders on board? That was actually the question that was raised here by President Emmanuel Macron when he said that he wouldn't join the board, is that this would compete with organizations like the UN. What do you make of this?
Yes, and what did Trump respond? He would put 200% tariffs on all French wine and champagne. I mean, honestly, the bullying in relation to a board with the title peace in it, it's not even ironic. It's ridiculous. And then the suggestion that Benjamin Netanyahu, who himself was on corruption charges before he led his country to avoid facing that, into this terrible situation, which is deeply unpopular even amongst his own Israelis. He's accepted that, an insult to the Gazans who've been starved, who've had civilians bombed, displaced, and terribly treated, disproportionate retaliation there. And then for Putin, I mean, you know, this guy is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians. I don't even have to say it. In good company, of course, we've got the Belarusian dictator Lukashenko. He's up for it. You've got Viktor Orban, another authoritarian leader, keen as mustard. Even the right-wing leader in Italy, Meloni, has come out and said she's not sure about all this. She'd have to look into it. That's the position of the UK government, which I applaud. They need to tread very carefully before accepting this. Interestingly, Mark Carney has said and has accepted the invitation, but he said he will not be paying the membership fee to the world's worst golf club. I mean, those weren't his words, but that's what it looks like to me. Reported $1 billion. And quite right too. Germany also said they would get on board if they could have a guarantee of the framework of the rules-based international law would be respected. Well, that won't be the case if your main people sitting around the table are Benjamin Netanyahu, Viktor Orban, Lukashenko, Putin. This is really serious. Will it be the end of the United Nations Security Council? I don't think so. I actually don't think so. But I think it does expose, once again, the weakness of an organization that was set up in good faith, but unfortunately, due to the power of the veto and a lack of political will to tackle the issues that it was set up to tackle, as well as the fact that the countries that are very often involved in the issues of security breaches and are sitting at the table has undermined it, and it's been seen as toothless for too long. I think the future of the United Nations Security Council increasingly will be a humanitarian, and perhaps have less and less significance. But who can make a prediction? Honestly, who knew that Venezuela would be in the position it's in this year? Who knew that we would be? When that happened, I actually said to my husband in the morning, gosh, everybody's wondering about Greenland now. My husband said to me, no credible person thinks that America would try to take Greenland. So who can honestly predict what will happen with the border peace or with the United Nations anymore? Honestly, we are seeing the tectonic plates shift. It's utterly fascinating. And if it wasn't so worrying, I would be absolutely relishing this fascinating period in history. Unfortunately, we're all having to live through it, and none of us really knows what it will mean in the long term.
That's right. And Michael, also, as we reported, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu joined the board. But this was after initially hesitating, because the Gaza Executive Board will also include, for example, countries like representatives from Turkey and Qatar, whose inclusion Netanyahu had actually opposed. So how do you think these tensions with countries with regional tensions amongst them can affect the board's actual ability to mediate peace in Gaza effectively?
I think it'll be a struggle because you have so many different countries that will be coming in naturally wanting to sort of secure their own interests. And Gaza isn't even mentioned in the charter itself. And I think that there will probably be agenda items that will be put forth by various countries. I don't know that Gaza will necessarily be at the top of anyone's list. Also, when you don't have a Palestinian who's there to talk and raise the issues that are most important to the Palestinians, how is it that you're going to figure out where is it that we should be starting? None of those people are going to be living there. They're not going to be aware of the struggles. And unless they are doing in-depth studies about what it is that is required when you're rebuilding a country, and I can't imagine Benjamin Netanyahu, or for that matter, Mark Carney or Viktor Orban are actually going to be doing those things. You're going to be left with board members who are going to be sitting around the table figuring out, well, maybe I'll put something forth and we'll have that conversation. It can very quickly slide away from what it's supposed to be, which is a board of peace to help the Palestinians. And very quickly, it will not be that. And I think Isabel is 100% right. It's going to be a glorified golf club.
Exactly. Also raising many questions about the equity and the quality that this club is going to have, especially with the membership price of $1 billion. So now stay right there as we move on to another story. Elon Musk has hinted he may buy Ryanair, calling out the company's chief executive during an online spat. The bust-up began after Musk said Michael O'Leary should be sacked for rejecting the use of Starlink to provide Wi-Fi on flights. O'Leary blasted back, calling the Tesla boss an idiot, whilst also promoting their January sale. Isabel, we'll start with you. It's the world's richest man taking on the boss of Europe's busiest airline here. Whose corner are you in?
Who do you think, Catalina? I've interviewed Michael O'Leary many times, and it's not just his Irish charm. He's entertaining, he's good sport, he's taken all of this in his stride. Look, fundamentally, by the way, Elon Musk, even though he is obviously the richest man, cannot buy Ryanair, absolutely can't. And this was pointed out by Michael O'Leary very calmly that it's publicly owned, you have to be a European citizen, so that cannot happen. But the spat been pretty entertaining. This was all over Starlink and the suggestion by Musk that Ryanair ought to install his Wi-Fi into the Ryanair aircraft. Now, for an airline that is famous for being incredibly thrifty and therefore one of the few that are actually profitable, there has to be a good return on investment for Michael O'Leary, and he clearly did the sums, and this was not going to work. It's expensive to install the kit, it's heavy, therefore costing more fuel, and the type of clientele that use Ryanair will not be prepared to pay the sums of money being asked. So it just wasn't a good deal. But of course, Musk, quite fragile ego, was not happy about that, asked his followers on X whether or not he ought to acquire the airline, and he is worth, we should point out, $769 billion, which I looked up means he could spend $10 million a day for 211 years before all of his money ran out. But he could buy Ryanair. I think it's worth something like 39 billion. Correct me if I'm wrong. He'd have plenty of spare change, put it that way. But it's just frankly not possible. And Michael O'Leary was a good sport about it all. And it just exposed Elon Musk to be this huge ego that we all know now for him to be.
Following a bit on the Trump rulebook there. But Michael, we know that Elon Musk is not all bad, especially Starlink, because it's been used in Iran right now during the blackout. It's been made free for all Iranians, even though it's dangerous for them to use. And now Lufthansa has also signed up to use it on their own flight. So should O'Leary perhaps listen to what Musk is saying, or is this offer dead right now? What do you think?
100% he should not be listening, because from a journalist's point of view, this is nice fodder and it's nice entertainment. And unlike the Donald Trump stuff in Davos, nobody's going to get hurt here, or at least not too badly. And in fact, Michael O'Leary makes that point, which is that Elon Musk might be calling me this on X, excuse me, not Twitter, on X, but my 4 teenage children will also call me that as well. I think Michael O'Leary, from a PR playbook, he handled it fantastically well. He addressed everything in a level-headed, non-emotional way. He was very factual-based when he discussed how much it was going to cost, as opposed to what it is. He also talked about, that he believes, as his team does, that only about 10% of Ryanair passengers would be willing to pay for it, where the Starlink people think it's 90%. He said Starlink is wonderful, but he just said that from a cost point of view, it's not going to get us where we can justify it. So it was, I thought, a masterful job. He repeated some of the insults that Elon Musk had called him, and I think that makes Michael seem a little bit more sophisticated, which is probably not something that gets said about him too often, because he didn't have to dip to the level that Elon Musk was at. He just had to repeat some of those same words, and it made Elon Musk seem a little bit more immature and a little bit more like a spoiled child.
Yeah,
and I thought Michael handled it fantastically well. Sorry, Isabel.
I was just going to chip in to say, you know, Catalina, when we say things like Elon Musk is not all bad, I instantly feel like I need to just list all the things that are bad, just to give that narrative, because just off the top of my head, whilst you guys were talking, I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. He was doing Nazi salutes to the far-right National Party, Tommy Robinson. He's been imprisoned. I think this, not actually his real name, he's got several other names. He does zooms into the AfD far-right party in Germany as well. He's hollowed out parts of American foreign aid, which is going to cost lives right around the world. You know, when he came on the scene introducing Tesla, I thought, great, this guy is going to not only make green alternatives to, fighting this climate challenge, he's going to make it cool. And obviously Starlink was wonderful when we saw what he did, in the early days in Ukraine. It was life-saving. But I think Elon Musk, if he was to go on trial, is guilty of a lot of heinous things. For whatever you might say about Michael O'Leary, he's divisive, he's boorish sometimes, but, not in the same league as some of the sins I see as being the fault of Elon Musk.
Exactly. And Michael, do you think, does Elon Musk even want an airline added to his portfolio? Should he just stick to space? He already has social media space. Does he want something else right here?
Well, he's not an EU citizen, and it's an EU airline, so he has to be an EU citizen to be able to be a majority owner, because it is a publicly traded company. Again, Michael O'Leary said, go for it if you want to give it a shot. I don't think that Elon Musk would need an airline, but I don't think any of us thought that he needed X, and yet he was determined to get it. He paid a ridiculous amount of money for it. You never know.
It.
I'm sorry?
And then he ruined it.
Well, I don't know if, I kind of feel like it was already ruined. I think he just maybe brought it down to where, as Michael said today, it is a cesspool. And I think that Elon Musk certainly helped usher it into that direction even more so. I think it was certainly the least effective and the least relevant social media platform, and that's where I think it is today. Now he wants it to be, that medium where free speech reigns, and of course we know that that's easier said than done.
Yes, and just to add on to something that you said about the facts that O'Leary said, and I think this would be important to add, he said we would have to put an aerial antenna on top of the aircraft. That would cost about 200 to 250 million per year. In other words, he says about an extra $1 for every passenger we fly. So that would go, I think, against the Ryanair logic and culture here of low costs. So now it's that time of the show where Isabel and Michael have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. Let's begin with Michael, where art lovers are getting a very special treat in Milan.
Indeed. So Milan, of course, is the home to Leonardo da Vinci. The Olympics are coming up February 6th to the 22nd. And they have, well, I wouldn't say recently, but about 100 years ago, they discovered a mural that he had painted in a castle in Milan. And he had left it unfinished when he fled in 1498 from Milan because the French had come in. And what's happening now is restoration work is happening. And there's going to be a 6-week period when people of the members of the public are going to be able to go in and watch restorers work on trying to bring this a piece of art back to where it was. It's on the ceiling and it's also on a wall. And it is something that's going to be taking about 18 months from February or so before it's complete. And it's an opportunity for people who will be perhaps going to the Olympics, but also have a chance to see an original Da Vinci.
And that's great. It's never enough Da Vinci for us, right, Michael? Mm-hmm. And now, Isabel, there's another story that's becoming very viral on social media, perhaps for the wrong reasons. But is it ever okay to wear sunglasses inside? And I think our viewers know who we're referring to right now.
Yeah, so I'm taking everybody back to Davos, but for a bit of levity, actually, if you haven't seen it, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, addressed the crowds there with blue reflective aviators on. And it's just taken over the internet. Lots of memes about whether he looks like he thinks he's in the Terminator movie, because that's the thing. He is always trying to be cool, isn't he? Like him or loathe him, he's got that kind of swagger. And then obviously the internet was quite merciless, and lots of suggestions that perhaps Brigitte had given him another slap, and he had a black eye under there and had to hide it from the world's cameras. But he's actually had a really minor but quite embarrassing, gunky, conjunctivitis-y bloodshot eye, which we're told is not serious and will be cleared up soon. But it has divided opinion, because there is something about not just, a man, but anyone, whether it's a celebrity or whoever it might be, just a Joe Blogs member of the public, wearing sunglasses inside. It's like the biggest fashion faux pas that you can commit. And for a Frenchman to do it, just imagine what they're saying on the streets of Paris. I mean, he's not very popular, is he, at home anyway? I wonder if this might be the final nail in the coffin. A fashion crime is what done it.
I will add that from what I've seen online, it wasn't very popular amongst the French and the Parisians. Dear. Yes, all the matching, I think they were calling him tacky. Michael, what do you think of?
Well, it reminds me I'm going to stick with the Canadian theme for my part today. In the early 80s, mid 80s, there was a Canadian singer from Montreal named Corey Hart, who had a song that was quite popular in Canada called I Wear My Sunglasses at Night. And it was sung in a very moody sort of way. And I think that there is a vibe that we can all agree on, that if you are a man or a woman who is wearing a pair of sunglasses inside, there is perhaps a vibe that person has that we all want to sort of stay away from.
Exactly. Thanks to our guests there. Managing Director of This is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, who was with me here in studio, and of course, journalist and broadcaster Isabel Webster, who spoke to us from Surrey. Thank you both for joining us. That's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up.